Welcome to the SportsFit Mum podcast, the place for expert knowledge and advice for your pregnancy and post-baby health and fitness journey. If we haven't met before, I'm Marnie, mum of two, health and fitness coach, international athlete and founder of the SportsFit Mum community. Join us each and every week for lots of motivation and inspirational stories for you, the sport-playing, exercising, loving mum. Everybody, welcome to another episode of the SportsFit Mums podcast. Today we are talking all about pre and postnatal Pilates with a women's health and fitness specialist, the founder of MisFit Mamas Debra Seery. Welcome to the podcast.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Marnie. Thanks for that lovely invite. Great to be here.
It's going to be so awesome to chat about all things pre and postnatal Pilates today. I'm super excited. You've got lots of information to give us, and you even have a mini course freebie to share with us as well, which I'm super excited to know more about. But beforehand, can you start by telling us a little bit about what MisFit Mamas is, how you started it, why you started it, and what your mission is?
Yeah, so MisFit was founded by myself about 11 years ago now, and stemmed from having my own first child and not really being able to access any suitable exercise sessions that were tailored for postnatal mums. There wasn't really a lot around, if you can remember back then. So yeah, and I was already in the industry. I was already working as a fitness instructor. I was teaching Pilates at that point, and I was also working in education. So I was not a PE teacher like yourself, Marnie, but I was teaching on fitness courses already at a local. So it became just a natural progression for me to move more towards working with prenatal and postnatal mums. I saw a massive gap in the market and decided to fill it basically. So that's how it all came about. But I also have my own history as well, which I probably wasn't as aware of back then. But I've got my own history with a bit of pelvic floor dysfunction. So going back to when I was about 27, so this is probably several years before I had my first baby. I used to quite enjoy running. I used to teach like high impact aerobics classes, step classes, that kind of thing when I wasn't at the college. And I experienced a little bit of stress incontinence. So I was around about 27, late 20s. And, as you do back then, before we knew that much about pelvic floor health function, I just thought, well, obviously I'm getting old, early 30, this just must be what happens, and I didn't really question it too much. And it was around about that same time that I started to get a bit of pelvic pain as well, particularly when I used to run. So I wasn't a huge runner. I just used to run around the park, over weekends. And so I know now that the two are probably linked, but back then I didn't know any better. So I didn't realise that there possibly was a link between the two. And so I sought some help for the pelvic pain, but didn't really know who to speak to, or if there was anything that could be done about the pelvic floor leakage that I was getting with jumping and running. So I saw an MSK physio for the pelvic pain. Didn't really seem to work. And I think back then, I think MSK physios nowadays can make the link and maybe ask a few more questions, but certainly back then they didn't.
And MSK, you mean musculoskeletal
physio? Yeah, as opposed to pelvic health physio, which I'm not quite sure when they came about, but it was a similar time that I think pelvic health physios, they specialised in that area. But certainly then I didn't know anything about them. So the issue wasn't really resolved. The pelvic pain didn't really go away, so I ended up stopping running. The leaking didn't go away, so I ended up stopping running and having to empty my bladder before teaching a class. And probably fitness instructors as well, that probably still do that now. I know there's that do that now, I'll just have to go to the toilet before I do this class, So anyway, that was an area that was always an issue for me for quite a long time. Even when I started to work with the pre and the postnatal women, I knew the information was there, and I was given all the right advice to other women, but I still couldn't figure out what was going on for me for quite a while. And that took me down the route of really looking into pelvic health and what actually is going on for myself and for maybe some other women as well. And that definitely led me now towards the holistic core restore route. So I'm now a holistic core restore license holder. So I run those programs in Liverpool and on the Wirral too. And they can also be offered online, if not by myself. There's about 100 coaches around the country and overseas as well that work online too. And that taught me a hell of a lot about my own body. And so the pelvic health field completely opened up to me then. So it wasn't just about postnatal and prenatal exercise. It was really getting into the nitty gritty of pelvic health and how to really kind of rehab. And it isn't always about more pelvic floor exercise. And that was a key to me.
Just say that a little bit again, because I think that's gold. I think that really needs to sit into people's mind, especially as fitness trainers, that, you know, that's what our clients want, right?
Yeah. So pelvic health is not all about doing more pelvic floor exercise, or Kegels, as you might want to call them. So sometimes we need to learn to kind of embody the pelvis and understand it and, you know, feel what's going on for us. We need to learn to breathe better. We need to learn to let go of our pelvic floor in order to create this kind of blank canvas that we can then build strength upon.
Amazing. Okay, so MisFit Mamas, what do you guys do?
Okay, so I offer a few different classes and courses. So if you're local to me, if you live in Merseyside, Liverpool, or on the Wirral, you'll find us in the local parks doing boogie fitness, which is just, I always say it's the most popular class on the timetable for sure. And it's so much more than just an exercise class, because it's about getting outside, it's getting, you know, the top up of vitamin D, you're just getting the fresh air that helps with that, you know, with the mental health side of being a new mum. You're connecting with other women. So there's loads of time to talk to people. And I think that's probably why people keep coming back to that class more than the exercise benefits. It's the connection with nature, which we all need to do, and connection with other mums as well for that extra bit of support in your journey as a new mum. I also offer prenatal Pilates, currently in Liverpool. I offer the postnatal Pilates, which is now currently online, and that will become very soon an actual course that people can purchase and do at their own time, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit towards the end. I also, which I've mentioned, I also run the Holistic Core Restore program. So I focus, there's about 9 different programs within the Holistic Core Restore repertoire. I am a license holder, so it's not my material. It was all designed by a wonderful woman called Jenny Burrell, who has come through her own issues as well with her own pelvic health, and this is where Holistic Core Restore kind of has been developed from. And it's about supporting women in all stages of life. It isn't just about pre and postnatal, although they are catered. It's about all women embracing their pelvic health and just going deeper with that level of understanding on how their bodies work and how they can best support their pelvic health now, but also going into their future, perimenopausal journey and postmenopausal journey as well, which is so important, because how we invest now in our pelvic health is just going to help us, with that longevity of looking after our pelvic health later on, and keeping us strong and moving way into postmenopause and beyond.
Yeah, definitely. And I think knowing all this knowledge as well, or being able to share knowledge around pelvic health, will help those that actually do struggle with pelvic health even without children, and they question, and yourself at 27, they question and say why. I mean, I know I was at a tournament for touch rugby on the weekend, and I was talking about needing to go to the toilet again. I'm 4 months postpartum, and I particularly made an effort to make sure that I had an empty bladder before each game. And one of the other ladies there who didn't have children at all, she's probably a little bit younger than me, says, I have to go all the time anyway. She's, I think it's nerves, but it wasn't, like that. That's something that she's obviously doing lots of high impact. She will have to start thinking about her pelvic health before she has children, if she decides to have children, but also hopefully realize that there is help out there, because it's definitely a bit of an industry that's not talked about anywhere near enough outside of the pregnancy and postnatal world, really, is it?
No, absolutely. And I think it's getting slightly better. There's dialogue. It's not quite as taboo as it used to be. And there's a hell of a people like yourself and myself, and social media's really opened up the conversation, which is great. But yeah, I think that for a lot of people, it just becomes a bit of a habit as well. It might well be a learned habit from when they were postnatal early on, they felt like they had to take that control and empty their bladder quite often and leaking, and then it becomes a habit that you just go all the time. That's part of bladder training that we focus in quite a lot on in the holistic core restore program, because I've met people before now who they need to know where all the toilets are wherever they're going, because they have this anxiety, I guess, around toileting and not getting caught short. And it's not always about having to urinate often. It might be having to have a bowel movement and having that urge that they can't control, perhaps issues with their post-birth recovery. I can understand it. And I think over lockdown that became all of a sudden a real issue, because all the toilets were locked, weren't just public toilets. So that was an issue for people.
Yes, that's where my toddler decided that she quite liked, I call them bush peas. I'm from Australia, so I call them bush peas, but basically a pea behind a tree in a park. That's where she became slightly addicted to those, because she was a toddler and there was no toilets open anywhere and no one was letting you into the cafe toilets. And so interesting.
I want to exactly the same. We were more than happy to want to wee.
She did want to try and stand up, but she's a girl and I made her squat. But anyway, that's another story. I did want to go back to giving our listeners a bit of advice, because when you were talking about Buggy Fit and how it's your most popular class on timetable and it's more than the fitness class, and I 100% agree with that. And actually something that I did in my second pregnancy versus my first pregnancy was admittedly, I was in a new area, but I actually actively sought out the activities that I wanted to do even if they were online. I knew I'd written myself, I am addicted to strength and conditioning programs anyway, but, I did write myself a little, what I'm going to do in the first 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, when I'm going to start my postnatal Pilates, which I would love to chat to you more about, am I going to go to a group fitness class and that type of thing? And I already had that plan in my head, because the one thing I learned from my first pregnancy is that first, 4 weeks at least, there's not much brain capacity going on. The lack of sleep, the trying to work out your baby, the constant recording of feeding schedules and, nap schedules, and just trying to work out, you and your baby bonding. It takes a lot of mental capacity. And the last thing you then think about is, how am I going to nourish and move my body? How am I going to socialize, because you're so tired and exhausted that you generally don't want to. You might not feel comfortable in your clothes, you might not enjoy looking in the mirror. Those things are real. And if you already have thought about your plan, about how you are going to move your body, how you're going to socialize, what activities are out there for you, it will be an easier step to go and do them rather than an extra step of having to research it all. So that's my advice to the listeners is, if you are pregnant at the moment, make sure you know what's out there and what your plan of action is going to be. And I would say for the whole fourth trimester, at least for those 12 weeks, sort out the experts that you want to follow, get that information early, even if you can get yourself a mini course that you're going to provide for us. And, even if you can create yourself a playlist on YouTube and find a local holistic core restore specialist that you can have a look at what they're offering, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think rather than it feeling like it's extra things you have to do during the day, movement can just be, a walk to the shops, taking a long route back through the park, get some fresh air. I think getting outside is absolutely key. It's it does so many benefits for your own mental health, doesn't it? But if you can find out what's going on locally in your area, it might just be a play group, it might be a free walking, or something that's got some exercise element to it, like buggy fitness. But I think it's an individual thing, isn't it? But any movement every day is good. I think getting outside is really important for mums to just give their bodies a chance to move and stretch and get that fresh air and connect with nature and people where possible. Even if you just shop walls. The issue as well in those first few weeks, I always say, it's not for you. It's not for babies. It's for you. I'm not aware of where they are really, and then it's about having a chat to people. And
definitely. I mean, we moved into a new house and I love my new house, but the first at least 8 weeks, it felt like a bit of a prison. And sometimes And ironically, what I didn't do, which I should have done, is worked out the buggy routes around, because there's a few off-roading experiences that I had to do because I didn't recce them out. And my favorite coffee shop, annoyingly, in the town that we go to, I can't take the buggy in there. It's got like all these steps and this small little bit. So annoying. So when I go, okay, I'm going to go for my coffee. Okay, I can't go to that coffee shop. I've got to go to that coffee shop, you know, like, but they're all things that I kind of wish I knew a little bit earlier, rather than come out ready for my coffee and get really angry that I can't have it. I want to talk about pre and postnatal Pilates, because that is one of your specialties. But also, I love my postnatal Pilates that I'm doing at the moment. But I didn't actually do any specific prenatal Pilates, which I wish I actually did. So I'd love to know from you what's included in prenatal Pilates and why you think it's a good option for pregnant women.
So prenatal Pilates has a lot of benefits. Movement in general when you're pregnant has a ton of benefits, of course, but specifically the pregnancy Pilates, I think mine's definitely evolved a lot over the last 11 years since I've started teaching it. So I do a lot more in terms of, the pelvic floor education and core education. But Pilates lends itself really well in pregnancy because it gets you a little bit more connected to your body, and that brings huge benefits when you're going to go into birthing a baby and recover afterwards. So giving you that time out to connect with your body is great. It allows you to connect with other pregnant mums as well, if you're in a class environment particularly, but that can also relate to any other type of pregnancy specific class as well, of course. But Pilates is also, for me, it's got a real focus on, a few different things. It's mobility, so ensuring that you have good mobility, particularly around your pelvis, your hip joints, creating space in your core and your abdomen. So looking at posture, and it's all very well asking someone to stand tall and lengthen up through the spine and all of that, but actually there's a lot of muscles that are restricting their ability to hold themselves in these particular ways. So it's about releasing as well, releasing the tight areas of the body. And a lot of mums have come straight from the office to class, and whether they're at a home office, I think someone was saying the other day, because of being in a home office, I think I'm less active because I'm not walking to the shop for lunch. I don't have to walk from the car park into work or climb the stairs. I just move from one room to the other, and that's about it. So they're actually less active now than they were before. And I think when you've gone from just a seated posture all day, hips are getting tight, your back is going to ache, and so we've got a lot of tightness in the body, and that all needs to be released and moved. And some of the key things that we want to improve when we're pregnant is mobility and strength. So we need the mobility through the hips, but we also need the strength through the hips and the glutes, because we want the stability through the pelvis as the posture is changing and the pelvic position is changing. We tend to, not always, but we tend to get this more kind of forward, anterior tilted pelvis because of the load on the front of the body. And that can cause a lot of tightness in the back of the body, particularly in the lumbar region of the spine, the level back. But it can also cause the glutes, the buttocks, to switch off a little bit and get a bit lazy. And the glutes do a wonderful job of helping to give pelvic stability to the body, and also they support the pelvic floor as well. So having good glute strength allows the pelvic floor to do its own job and not have to take over from the glutes and do more than it's supposed to do. So and it's really about the balance of having good strength and length of muscles, particularly around the hips and of course the pelvic floor as well. So we'll do a lot of focus of strengthening through the glutes, but we'll also do focus on lengthening and releasing and stretching, letting go of the pelvic floor as well as firing it up as well, and a lot of focus on the breath. So, and I think yoga and Pilates are probably the two kind of modes of exercise where people really do start to focus on their breathing. And a lot of people in the past have said to me that the breathing in Pilates has got them through the birth of their baby. And learning to breathe in pregnancy is going to be absolutely vital for looking after your pelvic floor. And because that was the key thing that helped me through my own pelvic floor issues, was actually learning to breathe properly. Because if we breathe well, our pelvic floor should move with the breath. If we don't breathe well, the pelvic floor doesn't, and it can get a little rigid. And if coupled with, glutes that aren't firing well or are maybe too tight, then we fall into this, cascade of issues that might be not helpful for pelvic floor function. And that's going to affect the birth, possibly, and it's certainly going to affect their recovery afterwards. So, getting yourself into the best place possible for birth, to allow everything to relax for the actual birthing process, but also have that balance of strength to support the weight of baby during pregnancy as well. And I think I was reading the other day, up to about 40% of pregnant mums will experience some leakage of their pelvic floor during pregnancy at some stage. And it's normally the later stages where you're going to experience it, I guess, more, because you've got that extra weight down on the pelvic floor and on the bladder. So needing to go to the loo more often is kind of quite common, and leaking is also therefore quite common, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't then focus in and try and help the pelvic floor to build up that resilience and push that threshold up a little bit so that they can cope better with that extra weight down on the pelvic floor. So but we need to couple that with the balance of making sure that we can also relax as well, and that all comes back down to the breathing for me. So making sure that mums are breathing well. So if you can learn that in pregnancy, then that's really going to help your journey onwards into your postnatal recovery as well.
I love that. I talk a little bit about strength training and core activation in pregnancy in my Ultimate Fitness in Pregnancy guide, because there's a lot of myths around how you can what exercise you can do abdominal wise and what you can't do. And obviously, being a strength and conditioning coach, I know how important it is to make sure that you are still activating your muscles and building lean muscle, especially as you get heavier. And ultimately you do get heavier in pregnancy, and your load does increase, so you need to also increase your strength as you go along. So talk a little bit about that as well. And a couple of people have said that that's probably their big light bulb moments during their pregnancy, is that actually it's not all about slowing down in the sense of stopping exercise. In fact, there are certain exercises, and your pregnancy Pilates is a pure example, and your yoga and your breathing, where you have to ramp up your exercise. You definitely need to be doing more of those rather than going, oh, I'm getting bigger now, I'm just going to stop,
Finding what works for you, isn't it? And just modifying.
Adaptations, modifications, exactly. Okay, and then talk us through postnatal Pilates, when we can start, what the main focus is, and maybe a little bit about your course.
Okay, so postnatal Pilates, you can start normally from about 6 weeks postnatal. If you've had a C-section, I always say, you just need to make sure that you feel quite comfortable, that, you're not in pain, and that you haven't had any setbacks in your recovery. So, if you've had an infection, then maybe you need to wait a little bit longer. But if you feel ready to move, and I think a lot of mums who have been active during pregnancy, that's one of the benefits, is they tend to feel a little bit readier sooner. Not always. Depends on the birth and how that went, but they can be quite keen to get moving quite soon. So from 6 weeks onwards is when you can start to engage in a set program of exercise. That's not to say you can't move and do things before 6 weeks. So it might well be that you're walking, you're practicing your pelvic floor relaxation and your pelvic floor exercises, and maybe you're doing some gentle stretching, maybe you're doing some gentle glute activations where you're just starting to fire up the glutes a little bit, but walking's great for that as well. So a set program from 6 weeks onwards is a great place to start. But you know what? Some mums don't feel ready at 6 weeks, and that's also fine. Just moving your body how you feel you can is great up until you feel ready to take on an actual program itself. So you might be able to find a local class that can cater for you. If you want that social connection as well, that's great. You might want something that you can just fit into your own schedule. So it might be that an online class that I know you provide as well, Marnie. I will be providing as well very soon. Then that's great. It just depends what fits in for your own schedule really, and what works for you. So 6 weeks onwards. And the key things initially, I recover a lot of the things that I cover in the pregnancy Pilates. So again, it's just getting back in touch with your body, getting back in touch with your breathing as well, because breathing feels maybe quite different postnatally than it did in pregnancy, because all of a sudden can move.
Yeah, it sounds silly, but you're like, wow, I just took the biggest gulp of air. It was amazing.
Sometimes we'll find that the diaphragm gets a little bit stuck, and that might be because it's, you know, it's had a bit of pressure up against it because you've had a growing baby there for, you know, the last 9 months. And so those latter months, there might not be an awful lot of movement through the diaphragm. So we just need to get that moving again. And so the diaphragmatic breathing, where we breathe into the belly and expand the ribs as well, and get that pressure dispersing in all directions, you know, that's the starting point, really, getting everyone to breathe well, and that will get the pelvic floor relaxing and moving too. And then we need to just look at the postural changes that have taken effect in pregnancy, and we address any tightness that might still be presenting. I think as well, because those first 6 weeks of pregnancy, of that postnatal phase, you might have been quite static. You might have just been, certainly if it's your first baby, you will have been probably sitting down feeding a lot and maybe not moving as much. I think it's different when you've already got a baby, and you can probably relate to this, Marnie. If you've already got another child, you don't always have the pleasure of just sitting on a couch for hours on end, so you might have to be up and moving a little bit sooner. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So we can get quite tight in the hips. And I also find that some mums will say, you know, and I warn them in pregnancy, you know, sometimes you think you're achy now, wait till you've had your baby, and those first 6 weeks, you know, you can get very tired in the shoulders and the neck, the lower back, because you're kind of holding a baby in your arms in front of you for God knows how many hours a day. The shoulders get really tense, don't they?
They do, absolutely. And I also got quite bad pains in my lower back and my glutes from sitting down all the time. I actually had really bad swelling for probably 3 weeks, and I ended up getting a little foot pedal bike thing. And I used to just sit at the end of the sofa, feeding the baby, moving my legs, because I needed to try and get the fluid moving. I needed to get blood flow, and I just needed to feel like my muscles were engaging, and I did a lot of resistant band glute work, because I just felt like, you know, excuse any language, but I just felt like I had a numb bum constantly within those first 3 weeks, and I just wanted to move. But going out for a walk wasn't as easy because my feet were swollen. It wasn't as comfortable. I didn't last very long. I had the baby in the sling all the time. I couldn't put her down, so like you said, my shoulders are just like this constantly. And actually, when you're already fatigued massively, you've just birthed a baby, and you know you need to go out for fresh air. And for me, my competitive head struggles, you know, the fact that I couldn't walk around the block really annoyed me. So what was better for me mentally and actually physically for those first 3 weeks, I was in hospital for 10 days. And then when I got out, definitely the following 10 days, I just was like, it's too hard, not comfortable for me to walk around the block. Instead, I'm going to get my little foot pedal out. I'm going to try and increase blood flow, and I'm going to get my resistant band and try and activate my glutes that are feeling really lazy at the minute.
Yeah.
And I made sure I did my breathing. I used my breathing a little bit to as part of my like mindfulness and calming bits that I did, and I kind of, you know, coupled them together.
And I always say as well, you know, doing those lovely big diaphragmatic breaths, it does tap into that calming nervous system, and it's natural. You have more cortisol running around your body than your postnatal. You know, you're on high alert for the baby's needs, so that's all quite normal. But yeah, you know, if you can calm yourselves down a little bit on those tougher days, then that's really beneficial for your body to heal as well. Vegan exercises are great for that, not just your core, but it's mental health as well. It's what to do for yourself. You know, not everyone's in that position, are they? I think I didn't even know when I had mine, because my kids now are nearly 9 years old, so I definitely know a hell of a lot more now than I did 9 years ago.
I think also going through it as well, like I was pre and postnatal trained even with my first, who's now 4.5, and yet, you know, I wasn't planned enough, and I didn't really know what was coming, and I really played it all down. And actually I was back playing my sport 5 weeks later, which, you know, I was like, yeah, look at me, and everyone was like, oh God, look at Marnie, yeah, she's back playing, oh wow, great. And then not realizing that I peed myself 5 weeks. I peed myself every single tournament for the next 6 months, you know, whereas I didn't want that to happen this time. I knew the importance of not returning to running before my body was ready, and I needed to know that. And my first training camp, instead of being 5 weeks, was 11 weeks, and I've had 2 now, and I've not had any leakage problems. And I'm actually more proud of myself now going back at 11 weeks versus 5 weeks, you know, because you've got to sometimes, even with your knowledge, sometimes you have to experience it. But I guess that's why we do what we do, right? We want to try and help women be knowledgeable and share our experiences so that it can help them along their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And you live and learn, don't you? Once you've been through it. And I think if you've got quite I'm not very competitive at all.
I bet you were in your exercise classes. I bet you were.
But yeah, I think if you've got a competitive mind, then that's really difficult to hold back. One of the questions I often get from people who are very sporty, and particularly who run, it's when can I run? And they can be asking me these questions at 3 weeks postnatal, and I'm like, take a breath. How am I going to get this across without them just dismissing? It's hard. Yeah, but there's lots you can do, and I think that's it. It's guiding people down rather than saying that you just can't do that right now. It's okay. Well, let's see where you are now. Let's see what we need to do to get you there, and let's see, what your pre-running training looks like. They can understand the logic behind what you're doing. Then they see the goal, and they're working towards that goal. Then it all makes sense.
And for me, it's about planning, and I did make it competitive. I actually told one of my really good sport friends, I said, because there was a winter competition that I was desperate to play in, and I said, if you see me take the field, you kick me off, because I need to have completed my 8 weeks strength and conditioning. I call it 8 weeks out, like baby's 8 weeks out for those first 8 weeks. I need to have done that religiously. I need to be okay with that. And I need to have passed what I'm calling my return to running assessment. It is my single leg squat onto my little sofa when I'm putting the baby to sleep. She's here and I'm hushing her and I'm single leg down, single leg up,
With the sling as well.
Yeah. And it's like my nighttime routine. I've got my squat with my calf raises, got my lateral lunges, my forward lunges, my reverse lunges. I've got my single leg squats. I've got my single leg deadlifts. All of those things I needed to do religiously before I knew I was ready, and I needed to listen to my body. And even on the weekends, I probably played for about 2.5 hours. I ran for 2.5 hours straight, almost without stopping. And my body felt very, very sore for the 2 days after. And on reflection, I should have put a bit of a timer on myself and said, you need to stop in between here and do some mobility, or if you're too sore, don't keep going. And I think that's in my competitive head, and this will be for some of our listeners as well. You do have to be disciplined with yourself. Yes, I know you want to run at 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I know, I know you don't want to wait till 6 weeks. And I 100% get that. But give yourself your own mini little timeline or little tick boxes of what you need to do before you say, okay, I'm going to go and try running. Don't try it and then go, oh, look, I do it, because, the long term is forever changing your leggings, making excuses for yourself.
There's one phrase that I often say, and that is, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Because people will often go, oh, well, I ran at 5 weeks and I didn't leak, so it must be good, I must be good to go. But maybe they don't have the strength, and unfortunately it might actually catch up with them a little bit later on when they develop some issues. To invest in early on and strong, then have to stop and rehab.
Yeah. And something that you mentioned earlier, which I didn't jump in, but I should have, so I'll jump in now and say, I actually had leakage at the start of my second pregnancy, not towards the later start, at the start. I remember playing netball. I must have been about maybe 6 or 8 weeks. So I played up until about 12, and I was, having really bad leakage. I was like, wow, already, this is not going to bode well. But it was because I hadn't really spent enough time healing myself and reconnecting to my breath, even 4 years later, just under 4 years later. And that was actually my sign. I stopped playing netball. I didn't last up to 12 weeks. But that was my sign to go, okay, Marnie, you now need to prioritize exactly the right breath that you need to do while lifting, because I'd kind of forgotten and just go with it. I need to reconnect. I needed to make sure I added in a lot of my glute activation and relaxing of my pelvic floor during my warm-ups and warm downs. Like I had to do that a lot, because when you're running around all the time, you're really tense, and you would know this. And there was just no relaxing. There was nothing. You know, my hip flexors were super tight. You know, there was nothing there. And it's not a surprise that all that extra pressure, even at the start of my pregnancy, caused me issues, you know. But the fact that I planned and I prioritized and I sought help, then, you know, here I am now with no further issues in pregnancy, 14 weeks postpartum, and able to run, you know, without leakage. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't set myself a plan in my pregnancy stage, even for my steps in postpartum.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. And I always think, you know, once babies are here, that's not the time to research things, because, you know, how, you know, all these other things about sleep, you haven't got the time then, have you? So once you've got mental capacity during pregnancy, that's the time to do the research. Yeah.
So people are going to research into MisFit Mamas and your 8 weeks postnatal Pilates course. So we'll be able to put that in the description, in the show notes description. But I also want to chat a little bit about a pelvic health little mini course that you have on offer for our listeners as well. It's a free little mini course. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's just some essential information that I think all women need to know about. So it's really helpful in pregnancy. It's really helpful if you're a new mom. It's helpful if you're not a new mom, or even if you don't have children. And it's just a succession of a few small short videos just talking about what your pelvic floor is, what its function is, what it should be able to do, the signs when things go wrong, what signs to look out for, because I think also, you know, dispelling those myths of, well, leaking, you know, yes, okay, it's common, but it's not really normal. You know, we should be able to do something about it. We shouldn't really be putting up with it. And lots of other little red flags that, certainly if it's a first time baby, you might not recognise as being not within the norm. Okay, so yeah, we can all, you know, feel a little bit more lax down below, perhaps, you know, vaginally, but you know, if you get a heaviness down there, is that normal? Is it not normal? You know, so it's those sorts of things that I will be highlighting as well, so you know what to look out for and when to seek intervention, so when to go and see your GP or your pelvic health physio, and where to go for that specialist support as well. So it isn't just myself, it might well be a pelvic health physio that you need to see first before coming to me. And also just how to connect with your pelvic floor, how to relax it. You know, what does that mean? A lot of people don't even know what their pelvic floor is until you have a baby, and then you go, that's what the pelvic floor does. So it's just getting connected to it, and you know, it's such a foundation, you know, core foundation of the body, and it deserves the respect, you know, because it does such an important job. You really think about it when things tend to go wrong, and you start to notice things not, you know, it's not behaving as it should. But if we can maybe give it a little bit more care and attention and focus before we get to that point, then, you know, hopefully we'll stave off some of those issues later on. So yeah, so I'll get you connecting with your pelvic floor, we'll get you relaxing, we'll get you contracting your pelvic floor, we'll get you visualizing, get you breathing with it, and I've got some lovely visuals as well up my sleeve to help people connect a little bit better, because not everyone gets it straight away. I came out of hospital with like an A4 piece of paper, which just to do a pelvic floor exercise, and I don't think anyone really knows what that means.
Yeah, I think also sometimes you need different people to tell you different things on how they interpret or what they visualize, because I remember in my first pregnancy not really understanding much. You know, I'm trying to learn on YouTube how to do Kegels, even though I'm pre and postnatal. I just didn't. It was not until it happens to you that you're like, oh, okay, I actually have to do this. And I couldn't. And it was probably maybe my third or fourth kind of person that I'd connected with, that I was like, oh, okay, that's that I'm going to practice the way she is saying. So I think hers was around, she talked about like a corset, you know, or like, because people had talked about tight jeans before, you know, or, and then some other lady was talking about visualizing, you know, trying to hold something up your, like a coin up your bottom or something like that. Like people explained it. Yeah. And, you know, I had to listen to a few people before, you know, just hearing it over and over. And then someone else, I can't even remember it was something about a corset, and it was something else that made me think, oh yes. And then I found it and I got it, and I had that connection. I was like, oh yeah, actually I'm doing it right now. I just realized that my glutes were gone and I had this back arch. But yeah, listen to a few people, definitely. And knowledge is power. We talk about it a lot on the podcast, and you're there to give us as much knowledge as we can.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, seek knowledge, ask lots of questions. And if you're not happy, things don't seem to settle down or get better, then you need to ask more questions and get some support. Absolutely. I can't really underestimate how important it is to get the support early. Early is better, much better, before things may deteriorate.
I love that. Awesome. Well, it's been so amazing having you on. I'm going to put all of the links where people can find you, your free mini course around pelvic health, and of course your up and coming 8-week postnatal Pilates course that you've got as well. I always end the podcast with 2 questions. So you ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. What advice would you give your non-mum self now that you know what you know?
Oh gosh, how long have you got? Okay, so for me it would be, I should sing the song really, but I can't sing, but let it go. Just let it go. Absolutely. Just learn to breathe and let everything expand and relax. I think for me it was, I have a dance background, so for me it was perfectly normal to just scoop everything in and hold it there 24/7. Learning a lot of habits from childhood, I suppose, that's where it all started. So just learning to breathe and just let things go. And
it's so similar for games players. Like, I played touch rugby, netball all my life, did strength training from a really, really young age. I remember being in the athletics team at uni, and it was leg pressing, and it's very similar. You're constantly, it's short breath, but you don't let go of much. And in fact, we did quite a lot of kettlebells through a lot of my 20s, and that breath is the same. It's this shallow in breath and this quick pout out. You relax nothing. It's the worst. So it's really similar, I think, for a lot of sport players, definitely, as it is.
Teach very differently. Even the way that I used to teach Pilates has completely changed. I don't hold any abdominal contraction now unless I'm in a forward loaded position, like a dead type thing. Everything just breath now. It's very different to what I used to do. And
I think the industry's changing, which is good. It's nice.
You can question everything.
Exactly. And there's lots of information that we all still need to learn. You never know enough, and you never know what you don't know either. We've got to, as women's health and fitness specialists, we've got to be constantly learning as we go along as well, if we're going to share what we're doing. And that, there's no way that our learning's ever finished either.
No, absolutely. I'm always on a course of some sort. I don't know. You invest in yourself and your business, and you've got to stay ahead, haven't you? And all the time, like you say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm currently on it. I'm all about mindset at the moment, which it's helping myself, but also my clients, because a lot of our daily choices are, comes from where we are in our mind at the time.
Absolutely.
Okay, last question. What is my last question? Oh yes, your favorite thing about being a mum.
Thing about being a mum. So I've got 3 young boys, all just about still in primary school, year 4 and year 6.
Wow.
The last 2 were twins, which is why 2 years.
Wow, ago. Twins.
Well, no, actually, they were a C-section. They weren't quite in the right way. Best thing for me is, particularly because they're boys as well, and you hear this quite a lot, the cuddles. The conditional love that you get from little children is
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. I definitely got that this morning, a bit stressed. I still had a little 4-year-old. Mummy, can I have a hug? I'm like, yes, once you get changed. Yes, you can. But it was unconditional. She wanted to just, even though I'd, got a bit upset with her for not putting her uniform on and still playing, she was like, can I have a hug? Okay.
The most important thing in their world, aren't you? Marriage proposals from them.
I love that. That's awesome. Oh, Debbie, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. My 30-minute podcast has turned a bit longer because we were just chatting away. Hopefully some super knowledge for our listeners, and we'll hopefully get you on again soon.
Thanks so much, Marnie. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the SportsFit Mums podcast. It's awesome to have you along. If you would like to join our community, follow us on at SportsFit Mums on Instagram. Alternatively, do check out the subscription notes, as you will see a link to our Ultimate Fitness in Pregnancy mini guide. From here, you'll also get some details of the up and coming release of the new strength